I'm the money.
Every penny of it.
Ever since I was a little kid, watches marked little aspects of my life. I remember growing up, I was watching James Bond movies, and the first James Bond movie I saw was Dr. No.
À la banque.
I need another 1,000.
I admire your courage, Miss...
Trench. Sylvia Trench. I admire your luck, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
And I remember he had that dress gold watch on before the Submariner that he wore in Goldfinger. And I remember watching Sean Connery and being amazed at his athleticism, his charisma. And the reason I loved watches so much growing up is I think they give you confidence. They give you that ability to feel like you can do anything, be anything. Represent your style. They represent what you want to say to the outside world. And for me, I was fascinated in higher horology without even knowing it. My watch journey actually started on the playgrounds when I was a little kid. Going to New York City for the first time, the watch district, as well as the fake watch capital of the United States, if not the world. And I remember being offered some fake Rolexes out of a briefcase.
Man, that watch is so hot, it's smoking.
Hot? Do you mean to imply stolen?
Stainless steel Submariner, and then also a two-tone bluesy Submariner from Rolex that were fake. I think I paid $30 each for them.
I gave $50 for it.
$50?
And I treasured those watches. They were the most amazing thing. My true watch journey started when I graduated from the 8th grade. When I graduated from the 8th grade, my parents said, "You did really well in school. You worked really hard. What would you like for your 8th grade graduation?" For those of you that know watches, all collectors, usually when they start with pretty much the same watch. And this is kind of what I recommend. 16610 Rolex Submariner.
Come on, let's do it. Come on. Come on, man.
Don't be late again.
I ain't gonna be late. Come on. What we got? Ooh, that's tight. That's beautiful. That's nice. What's that? Oh, shit.
What's the problem?
Ain't no problem, man. I've been looking everywhere for this shit, man. How the hell you find? You don't know how you make me feel, man. Where'd you get this from?
That's a hot ticket.
I believe we paid $2,800 for that piece. And even at that time, not knowing anything about watch history, I was fascinated with the mechanism, the finish work, all the things that Rolex had to offer. And it wasn't until 6 years later, when the recession hit, that I realized what a great investment even that watch was. And then in 2009, when the economy really took a tank, I remember looking at the Breitling for Bentley watches. I was really fascinated with the Breitling for Bentley brand. They were really big in the mid to late 2000s.
Thank you.
Open them. Our membership, like life, has its pleasures.
Breitling Bentley 6.75. I don't know the reference number offhand, but it was a white face and it was a beautiful watch. They were retailing for around $11,000 and I think I paid $4,800 for that watch, which at that time was all the money in the world. But the watch journey again picked up in 2020. And in 2020, I started really getting into watches again because there was a huge surge in the investment class in watches, especially after COVID.
I argue that watches are actually not just fashion, not just a statement about who you are and the statement you're trying to make when you walk into a room. They're a phenomenal investment.
And I started to see the values, especially of the Submariner, really starting to take off. And three brands in particular: Rolex, AP, Audemars Piguet, and Patek Philippe. I mean, the pieces I wanted were way out of any imagination of what could be. In the mid-2000s, I always thought Breitling and Omega, because of watching the James Bond movies and wanting to be James Bond.
And that makes perfect sense. Since MI6 looks for maladjusted young men, I give little thought to sacrificing others in order to protect Queen and country. You know, former SAS types with easy smiles and expensive watches. Rolex?
Omega.
Beautiful.
Then I started to realize why Rolex held value, and then I got into AP. I remember the one watch that really, really stood out to me was the Rolex Daytona. And it was not the Panda, which everyone really looks at, but it was the 116500LN.
It is indeed the most sought after Rolex in the whole range, and the rarity, the scarcity, and the difficulty in being able to buy one from the authorized dealer has been around for over a decade longer than the current craziness with basically anything steel and anything Rolex. But when you start to look closer at the Daytona, you really do start to realize why it is such a spectacular piece like nothing else.
And so I started looking and figuring out, okay, if I wanted this piece, which is the ultimate piece, I got to really start understanding and being educated on that piece. So I was educated on it. I started looking at prices, and prices started coming down. One time, I remember Rolex Daytona's white and black face were in the high $40,000 range, and they started coming down into the high $20,000 range. And at that time, I became interested. This is a 2021 full box and paper set of the steel 40 millimeter Rolex Daytona. I picked this piece up in the mid $25,000 range or so. And the collectability of this piece definitely made it a great buy. But that's when I started rounding out my collection, right? So I got rid of the Breitlings, the stuff that really wasn't garnering huge value. And I thought to myself, if I owned an 116500 LN Rolex Daytona, that is something that will always have value. And then a year later, they discontinued it. A little bit later in that process, I was gifted an amazing watch from my uncle out of Texas. And this watch holds a lot of value in my mind because of the history of the piece. So this piece right here is a 1952 Universal Genève automatic dress watch.
Because in my opinion, Universal Genève, super underrated, incredibly ahead of their time. The Polar Router, amazing. The Compax chronographs, amazing. Little hand wind gentleman watches like this, gorgeous.
And today's value is around $4,000. This is 14 karat gold. And on the back, there is an inscription. And the inscription is to my great-grandfather. He was a brigadier general. He graduated from West Point in 1911, which, if you know military history, that was the class all the stars fell on. So it was an exciting thing. He was a classmates with Dwight D. Eisenhower, the President of the United States. And this watch, inscripted in the back, says General Walter Hess, Jr., March 1952, in grateful appreciation from your many friends in Colorado Springs. He was the brigadier general known to command the fleet of the 36th Infantry. So it's pretty interesting. He had a lot of military history, and this watch commemorates his career. And also, as a 35 millimeter, that was a pretty good sized watch at the time in the 50s. So even this watch still is elegant. Another watch that I was studying for a while, because if you remember, that Daytona was impossible to get at one time, right? The ADs, they'll give it to you for around $16,000, including tax, but in order to get it, you probably need $100,000 to $200,000 and spend with Rolex in order to even get offered that watch. I didn't want to do that, so instead I purchased the watch by itself. But I was looking at Audemars Piguet. And the reason I was looking at that is I really started to see the history of the Royal Oak. So for those of you that don't know, the Royal Oak in particular was the answer to the quartz movement in the 1970s. So the Royal Oak came out in 1972 as a Gerald Genta design. Gerald Genta is probably one of the most well-known watch creators in the space and has been renowned for creating some of the most beautiful watches in the world, including the Royal Oak and the Patek Philippe Nautilus. And once I went down the rabbit hole of AP, I really started falling in love with that brand. But wow, if I thought the Daytona was expensive, the AP and the Pateks went into another stratosphere. So spending $25,000, $26,000, $27,000 plus on a stainless steel watch seemed like a lot of money until I felt comfortable in the AP and Patek category. So the last piece that I picked up about a month and a half ago, this 2008 15300 Audemars Piguet Royal Oak.
One of the best watches ever made, full stop. is the Audemars Piguet 15300 ST.
Which you used to own.
I did.
Yes.
And again, that may be why it kind of dovetails back into my story. I owned this watch for the better part of a decade. I got into a position where I needed to sell it. I sold it. I made money on it. It did exactly what it needed to do in my life at the time.
It's very liquid.
I missed it every single day. It's real expensive now. It was expensive then. Now it's real expensive. Yep. But it's funny what a good and perfect watch this is.
And this watch was only made from, I believe, 2007 to 2012. Full box and paper set, very rare watch, very hard to source, especially as a full box and paper set. That's another thing that I started to realize too, is in the collecting space, having a full box original papers, especially if you get into high end of horology, is really important in the investment grade pieces. And I'll tell you what a magnificent piece. When you look at this piece, it is the 39 millimeter case, but as you know, Royal Oaks wear a little big, so it's a little larger on the wrist, and the finish work is second to none. Royal Oak is especially known for their bracelet. The stainless steel bracelet is magnificent, and the reason they created quite a stir in 1972 when this watch was released was in 1972, this watch was 10 times more expensive than the Rolex Submariner. 10 times more expensive. Their main marketing ploy was stainless steel as treated more expensive than gold, right? So it became one of the most expensive stainless steel watches in the market. But the three main pieces that I wear today is the Daytona 116,500 LN black face, which is valued anywhere from 25 to 29,000 in today's market. I wear the Universal Genève 1952, which is valued anywhere from 3 to 4,500 in today's market. And then the last piece that I own is the AP Royal Oak stainless steel 15300 ST, which is valued anywhere from 35,000 to 39,000 in today's market. So those are the three main pieces, and hopefully moving forward, as I do some more deals and as I go further down the rabbit hole, hopefully the next piece is a Patek Philippe, maybe a Nautilus, maybe a 5712 or a 5711. But the reason I love watches as a man is a way to showcase your personality. It's a way to showcase your soul, so to speak, what you love in design, what you love in craftsmanship, what you love in the collector space and the rarity and the hard to find pieces, etc. It's a fine wine. It's an Opus 1. It is a Chateau Lafite. It is something that those in the collector community know and they appreciate and they pay for, and those that don't know don't care.
Like if I opened a bottle of wine today, it would taste different than if I'd opened it on any other day. Because a bottle of wine is actually alive. And it's constantly evolving and gaining complexity. That is until it peaks. And then it begins its steady, inevitable decline. And it tastes so fucking good.
But my mentality is less is more. And so if you're starting out in the watch space, I highly recommend that you go for the stainless steel Submariner, similar to myself, as your first piece, and then you'll graduate out of it. And then eventually, once you start going up the watch horology chart, you'll start getting into Rolex, Vacheron Constantin, Audemars Piguet, Patek Philippe, and you'll start going up that chain. And once you get into it, you won't get out of it. It's a love affair. It's an appreciation of art. I look at my watches as a Monet or a Renoir or a piece of art that is not easily duplicatable, right? Watches really remain one of those things that many people desire based on what they represent. And only a few watches really hold or maintain or go up in value. And I would say the safest places to put your money, especially in the wristwatch arena, is probably Rolex Daytona. The second is AP Royal Oak, and the third is Patek Philippe, Nautilus, and or the Aquanaut. Those are probably your safest bets. And those prices have come down substantially from where they were a year or 2 years ago. And the entry point is a lot more exciting now than it was back in the frenzy mode. But something to think about. If you love the pieces like I love, the Rolex Daytona, amazing piece. If you love the Universal Genève, which I believe is a timeless dress piece. If you love AP, Royal Oak, which is a timeless piece, it basically was the impetus of all the higher horology of sports collecting, especially in the watch market. So if you guys love watches like me, you want to learn more about the community, or you have questions about what I've purchased in the past, or maybe watches that you guys want to buy, feel free to comment below and tell me a little bit about your story. Why do you love watches? Why do they speak to you? And let's compare collections. Let's see what you guys have curated and what you put in your collection and why. Love to hear from you. And here's my journey through watches. Hope you enjoyed. Good luck in your higher horology pursuit. Take care.